Now, they always say that history is written by the victor. But in the case of the Civil War, that is obviously not the case. And from that, for this, I go to the Washington Post. So, in the Washington Post, there was this article about history textbooks in Texas. Now, what are they trying to do? Well, Texas has been in the news before about changing their textbooks, which, by the way, are distributed nationally to all schools around the nation. And they basically have been trying to slip in ridiculous things like Moses, for example. Moses inspiring the Constitution, and of course, changing the real reasons for the Civil War. And I'll get into this right here. Now, it says the author of Lies My Teacher Told Me claims that American textbooks have been lying about the causes of the Civil War. Now, this goes into where it talks about the Texas Board of Education. Now, they had adopted some revised social studies curriculum in 2010 after, of course, a fierce battle in the legislature. Now, when it comes to social studies standards, conservatives have decided to champion causes that focus on teaching biblical underpinnings of our legal system, saying that what the laws that we have, that we follow in America, are derived from the Bible itself, not from anywhere else, but strictly from the Bible. As in, Moses decided to come by and, influence our Constitution along with Jesus that helped write it. That's almost as ridiculous as what they're actually doing. Now, it says the guidelines for teaching Civil War history were particularly concerning. They teach that sectionalism, states' rights, and slavery, carefully ordered to stress the first two and to sort of sideline the last part, caused the Civil War. Sectionalism, states' rights, and then, oh yeah, that little thing with slavery. But mostly it's just states' rights. States' rights, states' rights, states' rights. And of course, differences between, the North and the South, and when it comes to society. Yeah, you know what the big difference was? The reliance on human slavery. Kind of a big difference when you have an economic model in the South built on plantations where you enslave people. Big difference, right? Now, the first textbooks that actually cater to this will be coming out next month. And they'll be making their way not just to Texas classrooms, but to classrooms all over America. They are literally trying to brainwash the youth into believing that it's, no, it wasn't slavery. It was states' rights that caused the Civil War. They're changing history. They're rewriting history to serve an agenda. Interesting. And by the way, that's what, of course, conservatives always accuse us liberals of doing. Oh, you're indoctrinating children into liberalism. You're rewriting history for liberalism. No, that's what you're doing, dude. That's what you assholes are doing. You know why? Because you can't actually win on the facts. So you have to change the facts. I love that. A good example of that, right, is claiming, of course, that the Democrats were the ones who were the racists, and they're the ones who kept us slave. And Republicans, Abe Lincoln was a Republican. Yeah, but Abe Lincoln was a liberal. And Republicans and Democrats they basically flipped parties in the 1960s during the Civil Rights era. Oh, but they don't mention that. They just say Democrats are the racists. They voted against civil rights. No, Republicans, we're the guys that love freedom. Yeah, okay. All right. Interesting, huh? So, this continues. And it's got a couple of examples in this article, which are interesting. Now, it says that Texas students are required to read President Jefferson Davis's first inaugural address, which, by the way, doesn't make any mentions of slavery. Now you read that and like, oh, of course. Freedom. States' rights. That's what this is about. The War of Northern Aggression. However, it doesn't mention his vice president, Alexander Stephens, his speech, in which, of course, he identifies African slavery as it exists among us and the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization as the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. You understand? The slavery, the status of the Negro, which, by the way, was 3/5 of a person, and oftentimes enslaved, leading to and being the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution, the status of the slave. It can't be more clear, but if it's not clear enough for you there, we've got more. Another example. In 2014, the State Board of Education considered adopting a Pearson history textbook that misrepresented the religious views of the founders, claiming that Moses helped establish a legal system, including the Ten Commandments. This is another change in the book. It's not just a slavery thing, it also has this. But I'm going to get back to the slavery thing in a minute. Similarly, the founders of the United States wrote the Constitution and established a system of laws to govern Americans, but they are also part of a tradition that was familiar with the Ten Commandments as a guide for moral behavior. Also, the bullshit lie that they were all, of course, establishing a Christian state. No, America was established as a secular country, which means you had freedom of religion, but also a freedom from religion, and we don't actually, I always get this sort of mixed up here, in a way, on how to say it, right? We don't establish a religion, is essentially what we're doing. We're not promoting a religion in America. That's not what we do. And we were set up that way. We are not a religious nation. In the, there was a letter to the Tripoli, right? By one of our founding fathers that actually says we are not an established Christian state. So we can get along with the Muslims, or what they called the Muslimin back then. Oh, don't worry. We're not a Christian state, so we can get along with you. So don't worry. We're not going to go to war with you because we're not Christians, just because you are Muslims. That was the separation of church and state. That's actually where that paragraph comes from. We shall establish a wall between the church and state. Clear enough? No, not quite. There's more. Now, what's actually there, what actually should be in these books, is the fact that the Civil War was definitely about slavery. Not 100%, but I'd say probably about 70 to 80% about slavery. The original documents of the Confederacy show quite clearly that the war was based on one thing: slavery. For example, in the Declaration of Secession, Mississippi explained, "Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. A blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization." In this Declaration of Secession, South Carolina, it says, "It comes out against the rights of states to make their own laws, unless it deals with slavery, unless it conflicts with the laws when it comes to slavery." It even said, in the state of New York, even the right of transit for a slave has been denied by her tribunals. According to this document from South Carolina, the right of transit was a right of slaveholders to bring their slaves along with them on trips to non-slave-holding states. So South Carolina says, look, you can't make a law saying that I can't bring my slaves. I should be able to bring my slaves to New York. I don't care about your laws. My right to hold slaves in my state trumps your right to abolish slavery in your state. Wait, what happened about states' rights? No, this doesn't have to do with states' rights, only their state right to own people. Continues. Texas, in its secession document, says, we hold as an undeniable truth that the government of the various states in the Confederacy itself were established exclusively by the white race for themselves and their posterity, that the African race had no agency in their establishment, that they were rightfully held and regarded as inferior and dependent race, and that in that condition only could their existence in this country be rendered beneficial or tolerable. We only tolerate you. You are only beneficial to us if you are doing the work that we don't want to do for free. You're only beneficial to us. We can only tolerate you if you are under our heel, if you are our slaves, if you are in irons, bound, chained, whipped, raped, killed on a whim. Tolerable in Texas. And of course, the entire Confederacy, in the cornerstone speech by the Vice President of the Confederacy, said, our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea, that is, of course, of the United States. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. Look with confidence to the ultimate universal acknowledgments of the truths upon which our system rests. It is the first government institution upon the principles in strict conformity to nature. That nature being the superiority of white people over black people. That's the conformity to nature to which they refer to. And the ordination of providence. God says slavery is awesome. Hey, look, you never saw a passage in the Bible where it outlaws slavery, did you? No, of course not. Slavery in the Bible is used to justify slavery. Just like today, it's being justified, it's being used to justify denial of rights to same-sex couples. Now, thankfully, nationally, we've gotten past that. But nonetheless, as a nation, when it comes to law, we've gotten past that. But there are a lot of states and there are a lot of people that are still fighting against that. In 31 states, we do not have protections for LGBT people when it comes to workplace protections, for example. You can still get fired for being gay. And they still, of course, use the Bible to justify this. Now this continues. Many governments have been founded upon the principle of the subordination and serfdom of certain classes of the same race. Such were and are in violation of the laws of nature. So you can't enslave a white man. But when it comes to black people, our system commits no such violation of nature's laws. Saying that it's natural, not only is it natural to keep black people as slaves because they're inferior, but also God likes it. God wills it. This is from the Confederacy. All these states were part of the Confederacy. That's why they joined it. That's why they fought the Civil War. Know your history. Your history that it should not be changed. Texas should not be allowed to get away with whitewashing history like this. And anybody who is even familiar with this at all and has any sort of voice and any sort of say needs to rise up and say, you can't change history. You should not be allowed to change history, Texas.